The gunshot didn't sound like it does in the movies. It was dull, almost muted, like someone clapping their hands through a pillow, but I knew what it was the second I heard it. I was halfway through a nervous laugh, one of those half-choked ones that happen when you're trying to hold in the panic, staring at the sky above downtown Houston as it cracked with summer lightning. It took me a second to realize it wasn't thunder. The sidewalk jerked beneath me as people scattered like marbles dropped on a tile floor, and the scream that tore through the air didn't sound human. It wasn't mine. I hadn't found my voice yet. I turned in a daze and saw Jordan on the ground. His white shirt bloomed red just above his hip like some cruel artist had slashed it open and dipped their brush in violence. The irony, we just had our worst fight. Minutes before the chaos, I'd told him I needed space. I didn't mean it. I never do when I say that, but I was angry and scared of how much I was starting to depend on him. It was something he'd said casually about looking for apartments together, about maybe taking things to the next level, as if there were a rulebook for how people like us should love each other in the South. I'd lashed out, told him to stop making plans with someone who couldn't promise tomorrow. And now, tomorrow was bleeding out in front of me on the grimy Houston pavement. A stranger shoved me forward as I froze, yelling for someone to call 911, and I dropped to my knees beside him. His eyes were glassy, like he was staring at something far behind me, maybe some version of me that didn't fuck everything up. "I'm okay," he croaked, and even then he was trying to calm me. His hand clutched mine with a strength I didn't know he still had. I couldn't stop shaking. I wanted to scream that I loved him, that I didn't mean it, that I wanted every apartment and every next level he could imagine. But all I said was his name, over and over, like it could bring him back to me, and that's when the photo was taken. A bystander with trembling fingers caught it all, me holding his blood-soaked hand, our faces so close you couldn't tell who was crying harder. That photo would make the rounds in local papers the next day. Innocent bystander caught in downtown shooting. But we weren't just two strangers in a tragedy. We were a broken story paused mid-sentence, and that single frame would become the one moment, the moment I knew I loved him, not because he was bleeding, but because I was. The sirens came too late. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe it was just that time felt like it froze the moment I saw Jordan's face slip from shock to something deeper, something that looked almost resigned, like he already knew what was coming. He wasn't looking at me anymore. His gaze was distant, floating past me towards something that no longer existed. My fingers felt numb, even though I gripped his hand so tightly I was sure I could leave bruises. But his pulse was slowing, and I could feel it with every beat of my own heart. Time wasn't just frozen, it was evaporating. His breath grew ragged, sharp gasps like he was trying to hold on to something he couldn't name. And that photo, that damn photo, it haunted me even as I tried to pull him closer, to make him stay, to stop whatever irreversible thing was slipping between us. I don't remember much of what happened next. It's like my memory gets fractured when I think about it, as though parts of me checked out entirely to protect myself. I remember a blur of people, of paramedics suddenly swarming in and shouting commands, of a woman beside me, her hands shaking as she tried to explain to me what happened, like she had been in control. I wanted to tell her to shut up, but I couldn't, not in front of Jordan, not in front of the person who'd somehow made me believe that love could be something soft, something real, instead of the clumsy mess I was so used to. My chest ached with the realization that maybe I had never given us a fair shot, that maybe this moment right here, this slow suffocation of life, was all we would ever have, that the words I never said were now turning to dust, carried away in the sterile scent of hospitals and regret. Somehow, they managed to get Jordan into an ambulance, but it didn't feel like it mattered. I didn't even remember how I got into the car, just that I was speeding alongside the flashing lights, trying to tell myself this was all some twisted dream, some awful nightmare. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text. I don't even know why I looked at it. Maybe I thought it would distract me from the terrifying weight on my chest. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "I saw what happened. I've got something you need to see. I think you'll want it." I didn't understand. The text was too cryptic. I stared at it for a moment, confused and overwhelmed, before I realized what the something was. The photo. The one where Jordan and I looked like two lovers caught in a moment of unexpected vulnerability. My God, they had seen it. That stranger, whoever had snapped it, had been watching us the whole time. Without thinking, I pulled over to the side of the road, my fingers shaking as I responded. "What photo? Where is it?" But the reply came before I could even finish typing. "I'll send it to you. Trust me, you'll need it." The message buzzed through my hands like an electric shock, but I hesitated before opening the attachment. My breath was shallow, my eyes scanning the road in front of me, but my mind was somewhere else, back on the pavement, back with Jordan. I could feel my pulse thumping in my throat. Every second I spent debating whether or not to look felt like a betrayal. I wasn't ready to face whatever that photo might reveal. What if it was something even worse than I thought? What if it showed something that had never been there, something I wasn't brave enough to see? But curiosity gnawed at me. I swiped the screen and watched the image load in my hand, my heart caught in my throat. The moment the photo appeared, it wasn't just a picture, it was a gut punch. It was us, but it was so much more than just the tragic, fleeting snapshot of a shooting scene. There we were, Jordan's hand locked in mine, blood staining our fingers as we kneeled together, surrounded by strangers whose faces I didn't even see. The angle was perfect, a raw, intimate shot that captured the emotion of the moment in a way I couldn't even understand. But what caught my attention wasn't the blood or the panic or the violence that had shattered our quiet Saturday morning. No. What caught my attention was the look on Jordan's face, the pure, undeniable love in his eyes, not just for me, but for everything around him. There was no fear in his gaze, no anger, no pain, just love. It was like I was looking at a different version of him, a side of him I'd never seen before. It was a look I could have spent a lifetime searching for, and now it was frozen in time, right there on my phone's screen. I felt something shift inside me, a deep, raw realization that knocked the wind out of me. All this time, all the years we'd spent dancing around the truth of what we were, of what we meant to each other, Jordan had been carrying the weight of it in silence. He had been holding on to me with everything he had, even when I hadn't been sure what I was doing. I was the one who had always been afraid of labels, of permanence, of the kind of love that doesn't fit into neat boxes. But he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He was offering me something real, something that wasn't about the next apartment or the future. It was about now, about the present, about us. And in that split second, I understood why he had never let go. I understood what he had been asking for all along, and it tore me apart. I could hear the wail of the ambulance in the distance, and I knew they were getting closer. I snapped out of my trance, hands trembling, as I shoved the phone into my pocket and slammed my foot back on the gas. I had no idea what was going to happen, no idea if Jordan would survive this, but I knew one thing for sure. I was never going to be able to look at him the same way again, not after seeing that photo. It wasn't just a capture of a moment. It was a revelation of everything we could have been, everything we should have been if I hadn't been so terrified of my own feelings. And suddenly, the fight we had just hours ago seemed so petty, so small in comparison to what was really at stake. I was desperate to make it to the hospital, but my mind kept going back to the photo, the single perfect moment that had captured everything I had been too afraid to say, the truth of how I felt about him. When I finally arrived at the hospital, the chaos of the emergency room hit me like a wave. It was loud, disorienting, a blur of white coats, beeping monitors, and panicked voices. I ran through the halls, not even thinking, my feet pounding against the sterile floor as I searched for any sign of Jordan. Every breath felt like a struggle, my chest tight, my head spinning. I wanted to scream at someone, demand answers, but all I could do was cling to the hope that somehow, miraculously, he was still alive. I could still feel the pressure of his hand in mine, the warmth that had slowly drained away, leaving nothing but a sick, cold emptiness. I found him in a small, dimly lit room, hooked up to an IV, his face pale, lips cracked. The beeping of the heart monitor was steady but faint. The air in the room felt thick with unspoken words. I could hardly breathe. I stepped closer, watching the rise and fall of his chest, the way his eyelids fluttered as if he was trying to wake up from some long, painful dream. I wanted to say something, anything. I wanted to apologize, to confess everything that had been building up inside me, but the words stuck in my throat. He looked fragile in that moment, like he was caught between two worlds, and I couldn't find a way to reach him. Then, in the stillness of the room, something shifted. I felt it in my gut, like a spark igniting in the quiet. Jordan's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment I didn't know if he was really seeing me. His gaze was unfocused, drifting, but then his hand, weak and trembling, moved toward mine. I grasped it immediately, as if it were the only thing holding me together. And then he spoke, his voice hoarse but full of something I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry," he whispered so softly that I almost didn't hear it. "I should have told you sooner." The air in the room seemed to freeze, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what he was apologizing for. He was the one lying here, fighting for his life. But I knew in that moment that something had changed. Jordan had never been one to hold back, never one to let fear stop him from speaking his truth. And now, as he lay there, broken but still holding on, I realized that I was the one who had been running. Running from the truth, from him, from us. The photo had shown me everything I had been too scared to see in the real world. the depth of his love, the way he had quietly, consistently been there for me even when I didn't deserve it. And now I understood. I understood what love truly meant. It wasn't about perfection, about having all the right answers or playing it safe. It was about vulnerability, about taking the leap even when it felt impossible. I love you, I whispered, the words finally tumbling out of me like a long. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was speaking to fill the silence. I felt like I was speaking the truth, the real truth, the truth I had been too afraid to admit not just to him but to myself. His hand squeezed mine in response, the faintest of smiles tugging at the corner of his lips. That smile was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The photo, the blood, the shooting, it all melted away in that moment. There was no more fear, no more doubt. Just the two of us holding on to each other in the stillness of the room, knowing that somehow we would make it through this together. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, quiet conversations, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding what we had. Jordan's recovery was long, filled with complications that I couldn't quite wrap my head around, but it didn't matter because I was there. I was finally there in the way I should have been all along. I'd spent too much of our relationship keeping parts of myself hidden, afraid of what might happen if I let him see all of me. But now, with the photo still burned into my memory and my heart cracked open in ways I didn't know were possible, I understood something that had eluded me for years. Love wasn't a picture-perfect thing. It wasn't about knowing exactly what to say or when to say it. It was about showing up, especially when it was hard. It was about staying even when the world around you threatened to tear everything apart. A month after the shooting, Jordan and I stood together on the rooftop of a small, half-finished apartment building, staring out over the city that had tried to rip us apart. The photo from that day, my hand in his blood on my skin, had never been far from my thoughts, but it wasn't just a reminder of how close we came to losing each other. It was a reminder of how far we'd come. We hadn't just survived the tragedy, we had transformed because of it. The city lights below twinkled in the distance, and I felt a weight lifting from my chest. I reached for Jordan's hand, his fingers curling around mine with the same steady, unwavering trust that had saved us both. "I never thanked you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He looked at me, brows furrowing slightly, as though unsure where this conversation was headed. I continued, words tumbling out in a way I had never been able to speak before. "For everything, for staying, for loving me, for never giving up on me." Jordan's lips parted, his expression softening with something akin to surprise, but I could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. He'd known all along what this love was worth, and I was just catching up. "You don't have to thank me for that," he said quietly, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of everything I'd been running from. "I've always loved you, I just waited for you to realize it." It wasn't said with bitterness or impatience. It was said with the kind of quiet understanding that only comes when you've weathered something together. And suddenly I realized something else, something even deeper. That photo, the one taken in the moments when we were both at our most fragile, had never been about us falling apart. It had been the moment we began to rebuild, not just as two people, but as two souls irrevocably bound by something greater than fear. I pulled him into my arms, the skyline stretching out behind us, the weight of the world still there, but now it didn't matter. We were no longer trying to outrun the past. We were building the future together, one imperfect moment at a time. And in that silence, as we stood on the rooftop, I knew that no matter what happened from here on out, we'd never need another photo to tell our story. Because we had finally learned how to live it.